All right, hello everyone. Welcome in. Al Basler here with Brockton Blazers softball, and today we are going to be doing a special scorekeeping 101 tutorial about how to keep a scorebook, some tips, some basics, and just essentially kind of give you an idea as to how you can help out, whether you are a parent or a coach who is tasked with keeping the book. We've had quite a few people over the past couple of years who have talked about how they've no idea how to score a game, how to keep a book, and they want to help, but they don't really know how. So we figured where we normally have a game going on, and we don't, mostly because of the rain, but also we didn't have a home game scheduled for today. We would set up this live stream where we go over, again, kind of the basics of keeping the scorebook, and also some ways you can use the info if you're a coach to not only make decisions before a game, but also on the field during a game as well. The chat is available, so if anybody wants to ask a question, feel free, and I will try and get to those as they come up, or we'll have a section towards the end where we can answer some questions for folks. So anyway, let's get going. If you're watching this live on Twitch, we will also be putting this up on YouTube after the stream is over. So if you miss anything, you can go back and watch it there, and it'll be there in perpetuity, or until YouTube goes away, if that's a thing that might ever happen. But all right, so let's get down to business. Scorekeeping 101. Let me get our slideshow ready to go. All right. So the first thing we want to talk about is what does your scorebook do for you or for a game? So during a game, it's essentially tells you the story of the game. A well-kept scorebook, you should be able to look at it, and you won't know every single detail that happens, but you should be able to have the basic understanding of how the game went. It's a live tracking of the score of the game, so it will let you know the score, what inning, how many outs, essentially what the game state is at the current time. It also can help you shape in-game decisions, things like defensive positioning or offensive strategy, and we'll get a little bit more into those later on. It's also useful after a game. It's a record of what happened. If there's ever, if there's a discrepancy between the teams as to what happened, we're talking about mostly use of this in rec softball, where, there's not an official scorekeeper. So you're relying on both sides to have, a scorebook, whether it's an actual physical scorebook or it's in Game Changer, of kind of what happened, so that at the end of the game, everyone agrees this is the score, this is who won. I've seen some situations where, especially where Game Changer is such a prevalent use for coaches lately, that sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to go back and on the fly look at what happened if there's a discrepancy, if there's a disagreement on what the score is or how many outs there are, or what the game state is. A lot of the rec leagues that we play in, our teams play in, there's a run limit per inning, and if one side has 5 runs in, while the other side says there's only 4, it's like, well, if you look at the book side by side, it's usually pretty easy to figure out where that difference is. Where sometimes I've seen it with Game Changer is that it can be difficult to get that real fast comparison. It's also useful. You can use it as a coach, you can use it to evaluate your team performance from the game. Obviously you're there watching the game, you're taking everything in, but there are things, maybe little details, that you're not going to remember every single pitch, every single play, every single hit, every single out. So being able to go back and look at your scorebook and having the information that you as a coach wants can be critical for helping you evaluate how your team performed over the course of a game. And as an extension of that, it can help you plan for your next game. You can look and you can see, who are your hitters that are performing well. That maybe you've got, some of your lineup who are really putting the bat on the ball well. And yeah, your eyeballs will tell you that, but sometimes it goes, you can go back and you go, oh, this player, went 3 for 4 in the last game. So maybe we're going to bump her up in the batting order for the next game. So things like that, things, what your scorebook can actually do for you as a coach. Now, if you're just starting out scoring, these are what I consider the absolute bare essentials of what you need your scorebook to do for you. You should be able to look at your book and you should be able to know who scored, who made outs, and where in the world you are in your batting order. I've seen people just track, tally scores and outs, but they don't necessarily know who are the people that scored. If there's a disagreement between the coaches on the score or the situation, the outs, where you are in the batting order, if you're not keeping up with that book properly, it's going to be hard for you to argue your case. So these are what I consider the 3 absolute bare essentials of what you should be tracking in your scorebook. So this is essentially, if you haven't seen a scorebook, this is an example of what a page in a scorebook looks like. There are many different kinds of scorebooks. Most scorebooks won't look exactly like this. This is one of the ones that I tend to use, and I actually like it. So if you'll notice on the left-hand side, and I can use my pointer, use my latest. Oh, look at this. We're fancy right now with our laser pointer here. So you've got your lineup over here. You number your players in your order 1 through 9 is what's showing here. But obviously for those of us who play in leagues with continuous batting orders, all of your players bat. So you want to make sure that you have a scorebook that has enough spaces for the number of players that you have on your team. And then you have the score box for each at bat. And if you look at the top on this one, it kind of has your common outcomes of an at bat up here. And you would essentially just circle what happens. So you have single, double, triple, home run, etc. You'll have like this one here has a specific spot for RBI. So if you want to mark how many runs the batter drove in on their at bat. This one on the left side here has a count tracker. So you can just mark off balls and strikes. And then this is an out tracker as well. So if you want to, so the first out, second out, third out, all that. And then usually most at least have some kind of a box where you can write something in that might not be covered by the general outcomes that they have here. And we'll go over some of those in a moment. And then they will all typically have some form of a diamond that will show you the advancement of the batter as they go along the bases. So obviously, if they walk, you'll draw a line over to first. If they get to second, you just keep drawing until hopefully they score a run if it's your team. And there's a couple of different ways to usually denote if a run is scored. The most common one that you see is to kind of color in the diamond. Once you complete the diamond, you just kind of color it in. So this way, it's a very quick and easy way to look and go, okay, that's a run that scored. It's a colored in diamond. Sometimes you'll just see the diamond. If it's completed, that's an indication that the run scored. Sometimes people will circle. Maybe they'll circle the diamond, or you need some particular way so that you can very quickly and easily look and say, okay, that's a run that scored. So how do you use that batter's box? So you have essentially each box should answer several questions. You should be able to look at that batter's box and know for sure, what did the batter do? Did they get hit? Did they get out? Did they walk? What was the result of their at bat? Where did the ball go? This one is sometimes maybe more of an advanced one. If you're just starting out, this is not necessarily as crucial, but this can be very valuable information to a coach, especially from a defensive standpoint. If, if you've got a hitter who hits hits a line drive down the left field line and they get a double, if you just mark double, you do, all right, maybe you'll remember. You might remember the next time they come up, but there's a good chance that, over the course of an inning, 2 innings, maybe 3 innings before that batter comes up again, you're not going to remember exactly where they hit the ball. But if you make a note in there of where the ball went, this way you'll know, okay, that person comes up next time. Okay, let's guard the line a little bit more. There's a couple different ways that you can mark this too, and we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit as well. How did the batter advance? Did they, advance on further hits? Did they steal a base? Was it a wild pitch, a pass ball? Again, this is a personal preference sort of thing, but this also helps you to know if, again, if you've got a fast runner who is good at stealing bases, or if, the pitcher's wild, you have a pitcher who's throwing a lot of wild pitches, or your catcher is letting up a lot of pass balls. This being noted in your scorebook can actually help you kind of diagnose some things. How'd the batter score? Were they driven in? Did they, was it where they walked in? Did they, reach? They score on a pass ball? How'd the batter score? Or did the batter score? First of all, again, like, how did they get there? But did they score or did they not score? And it wasn't out recorded. All of that stuff should be fairly obvious based on your individual batter box. So now it's time to get into some of the nuts and bolts of how things are denoted in a scorebook. And one of the first things that really kind of trips people up is position numbering. They'll look at someone's scorebook and they'll see something like F3 and they're like, well, what does that mean? That means they fly out to the third baseman? No. So positions are assigned a number, and this is the traditional 1 through 9 of position numbering. So 1 is your pitcher, 2 is your catcher, 3 is your first baseman, 4 is your second baseman, 5 is your third baseman, 6 is your shortstop, 7 is your left fielder, 8 is your center fielder, 9 is your right fielder. It's pretty simple when you look at it this way. You're starting with your pitcher and catcher, and then you're kind of, you're going to the baseman. Most people get a little thrown off because you think if you're going around the infield, you're kind of skipping over your shortstop, and then your shortstop gets numbered there. And then your outfielders. One thing to note is that infield kind of gets numbered from right to left, but the outfielders go from left to right. So, but once you kind of know the numbers, it kind of becomes second nature. And one thing to keep in mind is that some of us, especially on the softball side of things, at the younger ages, we might be playing with 10 fielders. So you'll have 4 outfielders. There's no standard way to denote that. Oftentimes, sometimes you'll see, like 10 is kind of that extra outfielder. If you look at more like adult leagues, it's not as prevalent in youth softball. Generally, if you're running 4 outfielders, you're probably just positioning them left field, left center field, right field. But in adult leagues, sometimes maybe you're playing with like a short fielder. So you've got 3 outfielders kind of playing a traditional deeper outfield. And then you kind of have a short fielder who's kind of playing on like the pull side of the field. So usually there's no official way to denote that. So it kind of leaves it up to you. Me, if I'm, usually if there's a fly ball and it's caught by, the left center fielder, I'll either just mark left or center, or I might even do like 78 so that I know it went there. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I kind of deal with some of that stuff when we're talking about, denoting where the ball went. So now we have a list here of these what I call common scorebook notations. These are things that you'll probably see over the course of a scorebook. And so let's take a look at what these are. So, obvious ones, 1B, 2B, 3B, home run. Those are things that you typically will see on a stat sheet. If you're anywhere familiar with stat keeping in baseball or softball, you've seen these a million times. So 1B is single, 2B double, 3B triple, HR home run. BB is walk. And if you're kind of confused as to how do you get HBB out of walk, it stands for base on balls. HBP, hit by pitch. It's sometimes it's worthwhile to denote the difference, because while yes, a hit by pitch is technically a walk, it can be something where some leagues actually have rules about hit by pitches. After so many in an inning or in a game, a pitcher has to come out. So it is sometimes important to track the difference between a hit by pitch and a walk. K is a strikeout, and sometimes you'll see it written as a backwards K, which means that the batter struck out looking, so they didn't swing at the third strike. So up to you if you want to make a note of that. I, as a coach, especially when my team is hitting, I especially want to know when they're not swinging at the third strike, because if it's happening a lot, it's something that you want to address in practice. RBI, run batted in. SAC is sacrifice, and usually that can be either a sacrifice bunt or a sacrifice fly. You can do, I wouldn't do SB for sacrifice bunt, because SB, as you see on the other side, is usually means stolen base. So usually if you just put sacrifice and you put, so for example, and we'll get to a little bit more of this too on the other side here. So if a batter does a sacrifice bunt, let's say a third baseman charges, fields the bunt, throws the batter out at first, you would probably put sac 5-3, third baseman throwing to the first baseman. If it's a sacrifice fly, you might do, sac F8, fly ball to the center fielder. This way you can tell the difference whether, you should know. If you put sac and nothing else, you might not be able to remember whether it was a bunt or it was a sacrifice fly. Looking at the right side column here, so 2 position numbers with a dash is a ground out. So typically it's denoting who the ball was hit to and what fielder did they throw to. So looking at the example there, 6-3 would be a ground out shortstop throwing to the first baseman. You can start to see other ones can get a little bit more complex for, say, like a double play. And so if you have say you've got a runner on first and the ground ball goes to shortstop, the shortstop flips to the second baseman covering second and then throws to first for the double play, you would mark that down as 6-4-3. So it was shortstop to the second baseman to the first baseman. How critical is that? I mean, it's really, again, personal preference sort of thing. Essentially, if it's important on the defensive side of things more to know that, hey, this batter grounded to the shortstop, so that, the next time they come up, you can kind of give your shortstop a heads up. Hey, be ready. They came to you last time. We're not talking from an official scoring standpoint. It's, right. If you don't write down 6-4-3, it's not the end of the world. A number plus U is usually indicative of what we call an unassisted putout. So for example, a ground ball goes to the first baseman fields it, they go step on first base to get the out. That would go down as 3U, 3 unassisted. So first baseman makes the unassisted play. Again, just useful denotion on how an out was made. F with a number is a fly out. And so some people will actually even go further as to use a P with a number to denote like a pop out, if it's like a pop up into the infield. I don't think that that's really that big of a deal. I mean, if you do F5 as opposed to P5, I think with F5 you're still gonna know that it was a fly out to the third baseman. Maybe you wanted to note that it went a lot higher in the air and it's a fly out as opposed to a pop up. Totally up to you. But for my purposes, I usually just use F. I will differentiate with a line drive out. I will usually do L with a number, because sometimes it can be useful to know that on both sides of the fence, whether it's offensive or defensive, if your batter lined out, that's indicative to you that they made an out, but they probably hit the ball pretty hard. And conversely, on the other side, knowing that the batter that you're facing lined out, it can give your fielders a heads up like, hey, came your way and it came fast. So be ready. E in a number is a denotion for an error. So for example, if you see a ground ball to the shortstop and maybe they have a wild throw to first, you would mark that down as E6. This is sometimes it's more for official scoring, but it can be very useful for you to know if a batter reached on an error versus a hit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. FC stands for fielder's choice, which, if you're not familiar with the term, means that an out was made not on the batter, but on another runner on the bases. Also, could be that an out wasn't made, but a play was made on another runner. So let's say, for example, you've got a runner on first and the ball's hit to the second baseman and they flip to the shortstop covering second to get the lead runner going from first to second out. The batter ends up reaching first and we say they reached on a fielder's choice. So you would mark that as FC. Can be important for you to know from a coaching standpoint, just to know that, hey, yeah, this batter reached base, but they didn't reach on a hit. Again, younger levels, probably not that important. You're just more concerned with them putting the bat on the ball. But at older levels, it is important to know the difference between whether or not the batter actually got a hit, or they got on an error, or they got on because, the fielder's choice, either they forced out another runner or whatever. The next few are more base running related than anything else. So you have SB, which is stolen base, self-explanatory. CS is caught stealing, obviously, if they tried to steal and they got caught. And then the next two are more for pitching, pitchers and catchers. It's wild pitch and pass ball. So, obviously, if the pitch ball goes by the catcher, the differentiation is obviously the wild pitch is on the pitcher. It was the pitcher made a wild pitch, and not really. It's not a kind of not on the catcher. They weren't expected to be able to stop that. Pass ball typically means it's a pitch that the catcher probably should have had, or at least been able to stop, and they got by them. Again, those can be important for you to know from a coaching standpoint. Again, do you have a pitcher who is struggling to not only find the strike zone, but making it tough on your catchers, versus if you have a catcher who maybe is just not stopping pitches that they should get to. So those, again, some of these are, again, when you're scoring, personal preference as to what you want tracked, but there's value in having that information. So here's what I call your end of inning routine. This is what you should be doing pretty much at the end of every inning, just to kind of summarize the inning and the kind of the game state of, where we are thus far. So obviously you want to tally up the runs that were scored during the inning. That obviously knowing the score is important in softball. Who would have thought? I strongly, and I cannot strongly enough advise to coaches, especially at the youth level, if you're not at a tournament or some other thing where you have an official scorekeeper and you're relying on both teams to keep the score, confirm the score with the other coach or scorekeeper at the end of every half inning if you can. At least at the end of every full inning, but there's no harm in doing it every half inning, because this way, if there's a discrepancy, if you go over and you say, hey, I've got 6-5. What do you have? And they say, no, I have 5-5. If you're doing this every half inning, you can look back at that last half inning that just happened and figure out where the discrepancy is, who made the mistake. And you can fix it a lot easier. If you wait for, halfway through the game to check with the other team what they've got for the score, and you don't agree, now you've got to try and figure out what inning did the mix up happen, where, and if you're in the fourth inning and maybe the mistake or the discrepancy is in the first inning, now you both have to kind of remember back to the first inning to make sure who has it right. So if you're checking this every half inning, you're only going to save yourself a headache in the long run. We've had situations. We had one just recently with one of our teams where at the end of the game, one team had the score in one way and the other team had a different score. So now you've got to compare books and it becomes a mess because you have to go back and you have to rely on not only your book, so hopefully your book is detailed, but also your memory to know whose book is right. So the more that you stay on top of that, the worse chance you're going to have of one of these issues where you can't agree on who made the mistake. You also want to mark the final batter of the inning because you always want to know where you are in the batting order. There are times where this can kind of get a little bit confusing in certain situations for some people. In one case, one of the biggest ones, especially happens at in the youth level, especially at younger ages, where there is allowing of stealing of home. You've got a batter up at bat. Maybe it's 2 balls and no strikes, and pitcher throws one. It goes to the backstop. Runner on third comes and scores, and maybe you've now hit your league's run limit for an inning. So the inning comes to an end. And now that batter who is up at bat will be your leadoff hitter for the next inning. Same thing as if, more common, I guess maybe a more common situation is more applicable and it really doesn't matter about your league rules is, if you have a batter up at bat and the third out is made by a runner who's caught stealing. So that batter still, they were the one up at bat. They didn't finish their at bat, so they will lead off the next inning. So you always want to know where you are in the batting order. You don't want to run into a situation where you send the wrong batter up to bat to start the next inning. So we'll go over it. We're going to do a live inning scoring just so you can kind of see how the process would work out live. We're not going to obviously have a game. I have kind of scenario to go through. But this way there's a couple different ways, but the most traditional way is you make a little kind of a diagonal tick mark on the bottom right corner of that batter's box that ends the inning. So there, you know, kind of where that inning ended and where the next inning should start. One other thing about the runs that scored during the inning, and another reason why it's very important to confirm with the other team, it is a very common mistake to make for people who, and this is going to sound obvious for people who are very well versed in baseball and softball rules, but I have seen so many times where a discrepancy in the score comes from a situation where, let's say there's a runner on third with 2 outs, batter hits a ground ball to shortstop, shortstop throws to first to get the out, and the runner from third crossed the plate before the out was made at first. And there are people who will mark that as a run scored. Obviously, most people are well aware that that force out causes it so that that run doesn't count. So if you're checking and there's that discrepancy right there, you can fix it right then and there, and you won't run into a situation where, again, 2-3 innings down the line, you have to go back, and then now you have to try and remember, okay, you're saying that runner didn't score. They said the runner did score, and you have to go back and try and remember exactly how the play went down. So keeping on top of that is huge. It also works a similar way if it's, if it's not a force play and, maybe the run does score, but, girl hits the ball into the outfield and she gets out at second trying to extend it into a double, but a runner crossed the plate before the tag was made. So that run does count. So this way you're on the same page with the other team. Always useful there to check with the umpire, make sure the umpire is, agrees that the run counts, and then you go from there. So just a couple of things to make sure that you do it at the end of every inning, which will just make your scorekeeping a lot easier. And as a coach, it will make your life a lot easier and a lot less worries about discrepancies with scorekeeping between the teams. So one of the things that I advise for people, coaches especially, is to make your scorebook yours. What do I mean by that is track the information that's important to you as a coach. I am very old school in that when I coach, I like to keep my own book because I want to have the book right there in front of me. I want to be able to look at it quickly. I want to know the information that I want to know without having to ask someone who's keeping the book for me. So I just like having it at my disposal, and I prefer having that book as opposed to trying to rely on something like Game Changer. Some coaches, they don't want the responsibility of keeping the book and they want to give it to somebody else. That's totally fine too. Um, but essentially, you just want to make sure that you know the information is in your book that you want. And some examples of this, and we're going to go over more detail with some of these hits versus errors. This can be something that you don't care at all about, or it can be very important to you as a coach. For me, when I'm coaching younger teams, I don't particularly care that much if my batter got on a hit or they got on because the other team made an error. If I'm coaching an older team, that's a little bit more important to me because I want to know, like, are my batters, are they getting actual base hits or are they reaching because the other team made an error? At the end of the day, like you want your batters to get on base. But when you're thinking about it from a lineup building standpoint, you want to put those batters that are actually getting on their own merit rather than mistakes of the other team in those, more prime positions in the lineup. Hit locations, very important for defensive planning. Again, like I mentioned, if you got a girl who comes up and she hits a bomb to left field that goes over your left fielder's head and your left fielder's got to chase it to the fence. If you mark that in your book, the next time that person comes up, you're going to see that and you're going to let your left fielder know, hey, back up a little bit, give them a little bit more respect. It can be very important to know where to position your fielders by knowing what the batter's done previously. There are other things to take in consideration there. Obviously, how your pitchers are pitching. If you have a faster pitcher versus a slower pitcher from one at bat to another, it's not apples to apples. But at least having that information at your disposal gives you something to work with on defensive positioning. Quality at bats. Maybe this is something that you want to mark. You want to note in your book so that that maybe your batter made an out, but they had a good at bat. We're going to get a little bit more into these next few as we go into the next slide. Base running notes. Maybe there was you have a runner who was aggressive. Maybe you had a runner who was too aggressive. Pitching notes. How is your pitcher? Are they striking out a lot of batters? Are they walking a lot of batters? Defensive notes. Do you have a particular player who is struggling defensively and maybe you want to try and find a better position for them or something that you want to work on them with practice. So these are all things that I kind of consider more advanced game tracking. So like I said, hit locations helps you position your defense for future at bats. Again, if you have a very fast pitcher who's your starting pitcher, and then maybe in the third or fourth inning, you have to go to a different pitcher who doesn't pitch the ball at fast. You have to kind of base some information on that. Maybe the batters weren't getting around as fast on your faster pitcher and they were hitting the ball a lot to the right side, but your slower pitcher, they might get around a little bit faster. So things like that you have to, but if you've got the same pitcher who's facing a batter for the second time, and again, maybe they hit the ball to shortstop last time. Prep your shortstop. Hey, they came your way last time. Just helps. It can help you position your defenders a little bit. We like to say as coaches, everybody down and ready, softball ready, ready with every pitch. But having the defensive player know, hey, they hit the ball my way. It just gets them in that mindset that okay, I've got to be ready. This could be coming to me. Use simple notations that make sense to you. Again, everything in your book, you should be able to look at and understand. So there's different ways that you can note a hit location. The way I like to do it is I kind of put the type of hit and a kind of a position number. So for example, and this is where I would use that kind of box in the top of the batter's box to kind of make a note here. So if they hit a fly ball to left field, maybe it wasn't not a fly ball that was caught to left field, but maybe a fly ball over your left fielder's head or dropped in front of your outfielder. I would put it F7 there. So I know they hit a fly ball out to left field, because if I just look at my book and I see single, I'm not going to necessarily remember where that single went. So having that information can help. Um, Something like, so I put here G5-6, which for me is a ground ball that goes between the third baseman and the shortstop. So if there's a ball that goes in between two positions, I will put both of those numbers, and that is what I use to signify what goes, a ball that went between two fielders. So use whatever makes sense to you, as long as it's something that you can look at and know immediately, okay, that's what happened. So you can, again, position your defenders for the next time that batter comes up. Another thing that you will see from time to time is people will mark a line from home to where that hit went on that, the kind of the batters, the inside the field of the batter's box. The only caveat with this is if you do if you use the method of counting a run scored as coloring in that diamond, this can get a little bit messy, because, like, let's say that, it's a ground ball to shortstop. This is probably not the best example, but I'm going to use it anyways. Ground ball to shortstop, and the batter just beat it out. It wasn't an error, but they just beat it out. And then that runner, so you mark a little line from home plate to the shortstop area. That runner ends up coming around and scoring. Now you're coloring in that diamond, and now your line is pretty much colored over. So that's why I'm not as big of a fan of this. But if you're not coloring in the diamond for a run scored, and you're using another method where you just maybe, a full diamond means a run scored, that line can still work for you. But I typically like to have the type of the hit and kind of a position number idea of where that ball went. I might even, in the case of like balls into the outfield, especially if it's like a fly ball, like that F7 example that I have on screen here. If it went over my left fielder's head, I might put like a D in there after the 7 to know that it went deep, or S for shallow. Just something, so that just any little bit of information that I can give myself, so that, again, the next time that batter comes up, I can, tell my left fielder, hey, back up a few steps. You went over your head last time, or, dropped in front of you last time, just so that they kind of have as much, you want your fielders to have as much information as possible, so that they are ready, they're prepared. Because we've all talked about it as coaches. One of the most important things for defensively is preparation. Know your situation. Know what you're going to do before the ball comes to you. And if you're already expecting, because of past at bats, that a ball is going to come your direction, you're going to get that fielder thinking, okay, this ball might be coming to me. What am I going to do with it when I get with it? And hopefully it has them that much ready to make the play. So another thing that we look at here is quality at bats. So what does that mean, really? So these are used really to recognize a player for something that maybe doesn't show up in the stat sheet. Maybe they were down, your batter was down on the count, no balls and 2 strikes, and then they fouled off a couple of pitches. They, took a couple of pitches, came back, and maybe they walked. So if you just put them to first base and you mark base on balls, you're going to look back and you're going to like, oh, they walked. But you're not going to know that they really battled in that bat. They worked the count. They fought off some pitches, and they had a really good at bat. Being able to mark that as something is just something that you can know. And again, it's a great way of, after the game, maybe, you're talking with your team, you got your post game huddle, and you're kind of going over some things, and, you want to recognize, Sarah had a really great at bat where she fouled off a few pitches and, came back and walked. Like, if that happened in the first inning, you might not remember the specifics at the end of the game. But if you have that note in your book, maybe you get your book and you're looking and you go, oh, that's right, Sarah had that quality at bat in the first inning. I want to make sure to give her props for that. So, you could write QAB in the box, or make a star, however you want to do it. Just something that you can note Because especially again, youth sports, it's so crucial to give good feedback. Let the girls know that they did something good, because that's going to build that confidence, and the more that confidence they get, it just improves their play. So much of softball and baseball starts up here, and if your confidence is shot, your performance is going to suffer. So as a coach, the more that you build them up, the better you're going to see better results. So having that information in your scorebook that you can use to pump up those players for the things that they do well, it's nothing but a boon to you as a coach. A long at bat, again, walk after being behind, a productive out. Maybe they grounded out, but they moved a runner over, or they are, RBI ground out or something like that. Anything that you want to recognize them for, that maybe, again, if you just look back at the book and you see 6-3 put out, you didn't realize that, they moved a runner from second to third who ended up scoring the go ahead run. So there's, important things that you can do by tracking quality at bats. So then there's different notes for different aspects of the game. So for base running notes, and again, these are maybe just little things that you want to put either in a box, or, you can even put it off to the side of a batter, or maybe underneath, or anywhere you wanted to note it. But having it there is sometimes can be good. Maybe they missed a steal sign. I can't tell you how many times I've been over in the third base coaching box and I've given the steal sign over to my runner on first, and then they don't go. And then another pitch goes by and then they don't go. And then depending on the situation, I may just yell over, "Hey, steal on the next pitch, would you?" So if you don't want to be that obvious about what you're planning on doing, make a note in your book that they missed a sign, so you can say, "Hey, you missed a steal sign twice. Make sure you're looking over every pitch. Look over every pitch." Maybe they made a real smart base running play. They took advantage of a throw and took an extra base. Maybe there was over aggressive base running. You can see that a lot at times where, the girls who are faster or maybe more experienced base runners, sometimes that doesn't always work to their advantage and they try and take a base that they shouldn't have. So maybe you make a note. This is, she got thrown out. It was over aggression. We'll discuss later. For pitchers, pitch count is the thing. Maybe not so much as in softball as it is for baseball, but you still want to make sure that you're taking care of your pitchers. So, maybe pitch count is something important for you to track, especially if you have a pitcher who plays for and pitches for multiple teams. We see a lot of situations where, as a rec program, we might have girls who pitch for, their high school team, varsity, junior varsity level. Maybe they play for a club team. They pitch for their club team. You want to be mindful of how much they're pitching, because you don't want them to do damage to their arms by pitching too much. So, again, pitch count, sometimes, and we'll actually see it on the when we go to look at the scorebook. Some scorebooks actually have an area to track pitch count, so you can mark every pitch. It's again, more information at your disposal. Maybe you want to note that first pitch strikes. Maybe that's something that you want to focus on with your pitchers. So maybe you make a little, maybe a check mark in each batter's box when they threw a first pitch strike. Maybe you want to know earned versus unearned runs. It can be important. Maybe the other team scored 10 runs, but 8 of them scored on errors. Well, your pitcher did a pretty good job at that point. They're throwing strikes. They're putting the ball in play. They're just not getting the help behind them. So things like that can help you to know, are your pitchers, letting up a lot of hits? Are they walking a lot of batters? Or, are they, just unfortunately having errors made behind them? For defensive notes, a great play, a 6-3 put out just tells you that the ground ball was hit, the shortstop fielded it and threw it to first. But what if that shortstop ranged up the middle and made a diving play and then still made the play at first? Make a note of that, because obviously you're gonna remember a real great play, but make sure you have that note just in case. If, again, something happens back in the first inning, at the end of the game, you might not quite remember every nuance. Maybe there was a wrong throw to a base that you want to just make a note like, hey, this is what you should have done here. Again, the note below is very important. The scorebook is not meant to blame players. It is to remember what we need to teach as coaches. You don't want it to be kind of a punitive exercise, but you do want to take a note like, okay, we're throwing to a lot of bases that we shouldn't, or, we're very over aggressive on the bases. Make notes of that, even if it's not something that you address with the player right then and there, or even after the game. It's something that you want to work on in practice and say, all right, hey, in the game, we're making a lot of unnecessary throws, or we weren't making the right play. So let's work on our situations, things like that. But on the flip side, good awareness. Like maybe, you got a runner on third and a ground ball was hit to the shortstop and they saw the runner break for home and they threw them out at home. So it's like, hey, they're aware, like, let's get that lead runner. So things like that, mark those things down so that you can, again, anything that you can do to bolster the confidence of your players, you want to have that info available to you so that you can use it to your advantage. All right, so now we're going to look at sort of a sample inning and how this would work from a scoring standpoint. So I have our lineup here, and we have 9 batters showing. Most times you're going to have more than 9 batters, but this is just the situation that we're in. I'm going to ask you to bear with me on this because I am going to be trying to write or draw with my mouse here in this. So as you can see, I wrote the names with my mouse, and it's legible enough. But yeah, this is going to be a bit of an exercise. So we're going to go through. What could be, this is going to be an inning that is transpiring, and we are going to mark as we would. So let me get my pen ready, and we're going to do it in black ink. Okay, so we have Sophia leading things off, and she hits a single to left field. So we're going to mark her over to first. And I'm going to circle the 1B here that she got a single. Now, if this was me defensively, I would maybe put, let's say she lined it into left, over the shortstop's head into left. I would maybe do something here like L7. So I knew that not only did she single, but she lined to left field. I'm going to treat this as, again, more defensively than I think offensively, just for some of those notes. Because again, if this is my team hitting, I don't particularly care if she lined it to left field or she dribbled it to shortstop and beat out an infield single. That's not quite as important, unless you want to know, hey, like she hit the ball hard, like this was a good hit. Maybe make a note of that. All right, so our next batter up is Becca, and she drew a walk. So Sophia advances to second on the walk, so we're going to connect her to second now. Becca goes to first, and we're going to circle base on balls. Our third batter up is Fiona, and she hits a ground ball to short, and they make the force out at third, so they get the lead runner. So what I would do here is I would write, and this hopefully this is going to be legible, so 6 to 5 here to show that she was thrown out at third. Becca advances to second, and Fiona reaches on a fielder's choice. So here, I often on these will write in this RBI because I typically don't track RBI unless I'm doing like an older team that I actually am tracking stats for their benefit for. But we can put it up here. So we do FC so that we know that she reached on a fielder's choice. From a stat standpoint, that is an important distinction because that is technically an out. It's an at bat, but not a hit. So you don't want to mark a hit there. Also, again, useful to know that, she didn't get a base hit. She got on base, but she didn't get a base hit. So we got a cleanup batter, Amy, who's up next, and she hits a double to center field. And our runner on second, Becca, scores. So we are going to bring her around, and hopefully my coloring is not atrocious here. I'm going to color this in. I'm not going to color the whole thing in. You're going to get the gist. Fiona ends up at third. Has an awful looking diamond there. And Amy ends up at second with the double. So we'll do this. If you're going to track RBIs, put a 1 there. She got an RBI. And again, double to center. Maybe this was a deep fly ball out to center field. So here I would do something like F8. And then maybe I would even put like D for deep, or maybe an arrow pointing like up to say it was a deep ball or something like that. However you wanted to note it is totally up to you. Again, the important thing about your book, whether you are the one scoring for yourself or you have an assistant or a parent keeping score for you, is that you want to make sure that the information is what you want in there and that you know what it means. So you want to make sure that whoever's scoring for you, you know what their notes mean, so that you can just look at it and not have to try and translate a foreign language. All right, so we've got 1 out. We got runners at second and third. We got a run in. And so Sarah is our next batter. And 1 second here. There we go. So Sarah's up at bat, and she strikes out swinging. So we're going to put a big K here. Now, again, I typically don't use these outs here, but we're gonna make use of them because they're here. So this was the first out made here, and then here's the second out. Circle those. So there's the second out of the inning by way of the K, and I did a forwards K because she struck out swinging. If it was looking, I would have done it backwards. So that brings up Ellie, and she hits a ground ball to third, and the third baseman throws the ball past the first baseman. Fiona comes in and scores. So we're going to color in Fiona's diamond. Oh my God. Oh my God, I'm coloring out of the lines. You get the point. Amy advances to third, and Ellie reaches on the error. She doesn't advance to second on the overthrow. So we're going to write E5. Oh my God. Guys, writing with a mouse is hard. E5. So that's an error on the third baseman. So if I was doing this defensively, this is fine to me because I know that it was a ground ball to third. My third baseman made an error. Let's say, for example, that the third baseman made the throw and the first baseman dropped it. So technically that's E3. That's not an error on the third baseman. It's the first baseman that dropped it. I would write E3 so I know that the first baseman made an error, but I would also make some kind of a note like G5 so I know that the ground ball went to third. So the next time up, if I just see E3, maybe in my head, I'm going to think, oh, she grounded to first and the first baseman made an error. So this way, knowing that the error wasn't on the third baseman, but the play was hit to third, that's useful. All right, so now we've got 2 runs in. We've got runners at the corners here with 2 outs. And Mia comes up to bat, and she hits a fly ball out to right field, and it's caught by the right fielder. And so that is F9. Oh God, that's terrible. Let's do a redo on that. That's awful. F9. That's the third out of the inning. And now I'm going to make, that's how I denote, that's how you often will see it at the end of the inning denoted, is you have that little diagonal line. So, this was the last batter of the inning. Now, at the bottom of your score sheet, and we can't see it here, obviously, because we don't have, I zoomed in so we could get a better look at the batter's boxes. There will typically be a place to do a kind of a final tally. So you just want to make a note that you scored 2 runs that inning, or whoever scored 2 runs that inning. And I often like to do kind of a inning and a game tally. So I will do something like this, and this is a personal preference thing. So I will write something like 2, and then this is the first inning. So I will do another 2, and then I'll like circle it or I'll put it in a square. So this is how many were in the inning, and this is the total. So then let's say the next inning, the team scores 3 runs. So now it's 5. So now we do this. So I know 3 that inning for a total of 5. That's just how I like to do it as just a quick reference. But again, your book, do it the way you want, and so that you have the information at your disposal. I usually don't put it up here. I usually put it at the bottom, but since we don't have access to the bottom, we'll just get rid of that. So there you go. That is kind of a typical, that's what an inning. So if you were to look back at this, you should be able to kind of have an idea of what happened in the inning. Now, you could go even further on tracking how the runners got from base to base. So, for example, where's my pen? So, so Sophia singled, and then she got to she got to second on the walk from Becca. So you could even put literally like, it's really hard with this guy's writing with small with his mouse, but you could do like base on balls here. So, she got to second on the walk. You know, Becca walked, and then she got to third on the doubles. So you could do something like this. Oh, no, that's not right. Hold on. That's not how that happened. See, this is why you should do it live. So she ended up at second on the fielder's choice. And then she scored on the double. So, you could even do something like that. It's really up to you how granular you want to be with that sort of thing. I typically don't do that much of detail. I will sometimes mark stolen bases. Sometimes I don't even bother with stolen bases. I'll just, mark, show that they advanced along the bases. It really is up to what's important to you. Again, this is your scorebook. It needs to tell the things that you want it to tell. But at the very basic, you should have a good idea of what happened in the inning. So if you look back, we see Sophia led off. She singled. Becca came up next and she walked. Fiona grounded into a fielder's choice. Sophia got forced at third for the first out. Amy came up and doubled in a run. Becca came in to score. She got the RBI there. Sarah struck out. Ellie grounded to third and reached on an error. Somebody came in to score. Fiona came in to score. Oh my God, I've already butchered my own scorebook, guys. Fiona came in to score. So yeah, Becca who scored on the double, not Fiona. Again, this is why you do it at the time, so you don't have to try and remember after the fact. So Fiona scored on the error, and then Mia came up, flied out to right field to end the inning. You mark that your inning is ended, so you know that Amber is leading things off in the second inning. So there you go. That's that's generally kind of an idea of what an inning would look like scoring it live. Again, Scorekeeping 101. Be sure to track the essentials. What do you need your scorebook to tell you? You need to know who scored. You need to know where the outs were recorded, and you need to know where you are in your lineup. Make your scorebook yours. It should have the information that is important to you as a coach. If you're keeping score for a coach, maybe either you're an assistant coach or you're a parent trying to help out, make sure that you know what your coach wants. If there's things that your coach wants you to be able to keep track of, try and have that in there. Ask them how much information do you want in here? Or, maybe they give you feedback like, hey, thank you for doing the book, but would be helpful to know if girls steal bases. Like, let me know anybody who steals a base, or let me know anybody who's caught stealing, or whatever. If they ask for that sort of thing, try if you can. Try and make a note where the ball gets hit, so we know where to put our fielders. So, again, me personally, I like having the book in my hand. I like not really having to rely on somebody else to do it. I like to know I want the info that I want right at my fingertips, and I want to be the one responsible for it. But if you're doing the book for somebody, try and make sure that it has the information that they're going to need to make the decisions they need to make, both during the game and after the game. So essentially, your scorebook is the story of the game that you authored. So the level of detail in that story is entirely up to you. So again, you're penning this story. It should tell what happened in the game, but it should tell that story the way that you want it told, so that you have that information. Again, whether it's making those decisions, critical decisions, sometimes in the middle of a game, or helping you prep for the next game by being able to look at how your team performed, seeing trends, seeing things that you want to work on in practice, because that's one of the things that we all know. Those of us who have coached, that the true work happens in practice. So having that information in your scorebook to be able to look back and go, okay, here's where we can maybe make some improvements. So we're going to focus that on at our next practice. So that's where that's valuable to you. So, all right. Well, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you got something out of it. And if you have never scored a game before, that maybe you will be able to give it a try after this, and hopefully it will make a little bit more sense to you. I know I've seen people look at scorebooks as if it's a foreign language, or it's written in some kind of code, and it's actually not terribly inaccurate. It is a code, and as long as you know the code, it makes perfect sense. So again, hopefully this is useful for you. Feel free, if you are watching this after the fact, feel free to comment, add some questions there, and I'd be happy to answer them. And hopefully this will set you up for some success in keeping a book. So thanks for watching, everyone.